What's going on, world? Coming at you guys again. We got another quick video. Preparing for God's return. Let's talk about it. So it's 2026, and clearly we are at a time to where tension is high and conflict is a everyday thing. So, if you've had the opportunity to look at some of my videos, I've talked about the actions in which need to be applied and implemented to help facilitate and create a pathway for God to return and walk amongst his children. Whether or not you identify as an individual who believes that they are a child of God or the direct or indirect descendant of God, I can't really help you with that. That's something based off of your own premise. That's based off of your own ideology and psychology when you look in the mirror. But as it stands, if you do believe that you are a child of God, if you do believe if you are a direct or indirect descendant of God, then I'm speaking to you. So, in order to facilitate God's return, because everybody's still waiting on God to return, we have to make corrective action to make sure that it's ready for him. Because at the end of the day, the reason why God has not come back is because we have not facilitated the environment for him to do so. It's the same accord as if you have parents. You have to prepare and plan and, facilitate some form of an environment that is acceptable and suitable for them when they return, for them to come in. It's the same thing when if you're hosting Thanksgiving dinner, you have to prepare and, do things that are necessary in order to make things as non-hostile as possible for their return. So when they get here, they're proud and they're comfortable, and they arrive knowing that when they leave that you're going to be okay. So one of the biggest things that we're going to talk about today is assimilation. The way things are in the world right now, we are highly segregated. We have 7 continents, hundreds of countries, many of ethnicities, races, cultures, religions, genders. One of the main reason why God has not returned is because there's no premise to, right? God created everything and everyone. And since that time, we have further divided ourselves based off of race, color, creed, religion, etc., etc. By this notion, and if you follow the Bible, when Adam and Eve were cast out, just like Cain and Abel, Cain was cast out. What God is waiting for is for reintegration and reassimilation as a holistic perspective, right? That's why God didn't kill Eve. That's why God didn't kill Adam. That's why God didn't kill Cain. When Jesus talks about turning the other cheek, and we talk about eye for an eye, the reality situation is, yes, God has vengeance, he has wrath, because he has the capability of looking at an individual from a microscopic perspective of every single atom in their body to see if this individual is redeemable or not. And this is where we come into context for heaven and hell and purgatory. Your state of mind, your level of consciousness will create your reality in your environment, which is your heaven or hell. And then there's purgatory as well, right? Now, I've already talked to you guys about purgatory before. Now, purgatory is a inability to recreate, right? When you pass away, and what Native Americans or indigenous Americans believe in reincarnation is a real thing. Your spirit gets trapped here, and you don't have the availability to come back around to be given a second chance, right? You're stuck within the stratosphere. That's the unfortunate reality, man. That's the way it goes. I was about 5 years old when I started having my first episodes and events and situations of having communication with individuals who were stuck in purgatory. At first it scared the fuck out of me. I'm not gonna lie, man. I was terrified because I was, again, 5 or 6 years old. But over time, you know, you recognize it for what it is, and then you do have some that are here and which holds you no harm, and you have others that are here that they like to play around, right? Um, they do, they do things. They have the capacity to interact with you, not directly but indirectly. And so, these things are real. So, if we are going to try to, continue to move forward, one of the biggest things that we have to understand and recognize that, if you are an individual who is longing to see their father, their mother, true father and mother, not immediate, not like your direct mother and father, but the creator, then you have to go out of your way to humble yourself, right? This is like in the Bible, it talks about hubris. You have to have humility. Even the story of Icarus, we have to reintegrate and reassimilate. And I've talked about this before. It's like we are more alike than different. If we weren't, then we wouldn't be able to procreate with one another. That's just the unfortunate, fact that we've been psychologically conditioned to believe that we're vastly different and we're not. We have different psychologies based off of what we know as nature versus nurture. And that's primarily based upon, hundreds, if not thousands of years of exposure to certain environments and certain pressure within those environments. That changes the narrative when it comes to survival. And so that changes the psychology of what you deem is appropriate or inappropriate, and which is directly affected within your prefrontal cortex and your amygdala. So that changes your capacity for adaptation and assimilation as you, go through adolescence to adulthood. But, if you are out here facilitating procreation with the expectation that your offspring should look exactly like you, then you are not promoting the ideology in which God has intended for you as well as for people itself, because you are putting yourself on a pedestal. And we all know that people are imperfect, that we sin. That's an inevitable fact in reality. So, the only way to go back through God is, like it says, it's easier for a man to, enter the kingdom of God, based off of riches in comparison to the eye of a needle, because you have to humble yourself. Okay, you have to have some form of humility. And one of the ways in which we are so misguided as well as so misdirected when it comes to facilitating this purpose is based off of the inability to humble yourself and to recognize that our entire purpose on this planet is based off of the teachings of Jesus Christ, right? Humility, empathy, sympathy, but also having a stern perspective and not allowing individuals in your life whom are toxic, right? And again, it says to leave vengeance up to God, because, the overwhelming expectation is you have autonomy. God gave us the opportunity for autonomy, right? So we can pick and choose who we want to communicate with, but it has to be on a measure in which we know that we are not causing further harm or strife to an individual whom should be included and not excluded based off of race, color, creed, culture, or religion, right? Because they're a good person and they're trying their best. Everybody's imperfect. And this goes back into assimilation and reintegration. Again, it's the fact of the matter that nobody's perfect. So to believe that you are perfect based off of assigning and aligning yourself with race, color, creed, religion, or culture of its own accord without considering any other factor, then what you're doing right now is you're not promoting what God has intended in order for him to come walk amongst you again. Because now you have not put yourself in a position to where you're accepting of what God would have to say. Because if you are acting in a mannerism in which you believe your psychology to be superior, if God were to tell you something, well, he'd be wasting his time. You understand? So, these are the normative concepts in which we are being misled and, unfortunately led astray to believe that our actions or our achievements that are not aligned with creating what we know as the Garden of Eden, then unfortunately we're going to continuously spiral and find ourselves further and further segregated as we are now. Like I said, America is the Garden of Eden. We are the most diverse country on the planet. Every other country on the planet is 95% the same race. This is not what God intended. Because at the end of the day, we are all children of God. And if we just continuously act in a manner to where we have maximum amount of hubris, well, unfortunately, one of two things is going to happen. We're going to wipe ourselves out, or inevitably we'll run out of time.